N'Kosi Sikelel Afrika Malupaka misu pangolwayo Izwa imitandazo yetu N'Kosi Sikelela Tina Lusapolwayo N'Kosi Sikelel N'Kosi Sikelel N'Kosi Sikelel N'Kosi Sikelel Woza boya oitwele N'Kosi Sikelela Tina Lusapolwayo Morena buluka si chabasa esu Ufedi seti twali maswenyeho Morena buluka si chabasa esu Ufedi seti twali maswenyeho
Usibuluke Usibuluke morena
Usibuluke si chabasa esu si chabasa Afrika Pagate, gude gubengula pagate, magu benjalo, gude gubengula pagate, gude gubengula pagate. Amala, away to.
When Diana planned her memorial a few years ago, she could not have imagined this time of COVID, and so this has enabled people to join from many places all over the world. Due to concerns about security, all participants have their audio, video, and the chat function turned off. That way, there is no risk of outsiders and trolls saying or showing disruptive posts. However, there are a number of ways you can continue to memorialize Diana, and these were listed on the previous slide. We will also show that slide again at the end. You all have my email, so send me anything you want posted on Diana's website, and this talk will also be recorded and posted on Diana's website. Now I would like to introduce the first speaker, Diana's sister, Jill Hall.
For so many years, Diana and I have had our hour or so of sharing on the phone, every Friday night for her and Saturday morning for me. And I know that I shall be thinking of her at that time as the years unfold. Although we were so different in many ways, we had a deep bond and much respect and love for each other. I'm deeply, deeply proud of her and all that she has offered to the world through her dedicated and phenomenal work, tireless research, commitment, and courageous activism on behalf of all women over decades, the effects of which, I am confident, will inform and inspire others as we go forward and keep on going forward into the future. My sister, my one and only sister, thank you for being so phenomenally and thoroughly you. Diana asked me to place her ashes alongside those of our mother, which lie in the small churchyard of the church at which her brother, her twin brother, David, led the service to celebrate our mother's life, and at which Diana was present. I shall go to South Africa when I am able and do that for her. And now I wish to read for Diana the same words as our mother asked me to read at her funeral, the author of which I'm afraid I do not know, but then I've never met anyone who does know. But luckily, miraculously, I found the old bit of paper on which it was written all those years ago. I said to the one who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown." And the reply came, "Go out into the darkness. That shall be to you better than a light and safer than a known way." So I went forth and trod gladly into the night. And I was led up towards the hills, and the breaking of day in the east. Go well, my sister. Thank you.
I wish I could see everyone, because I know if we could be physically gathered together today, the sight from here would be breathtaking. I first met Diana when I was a student at Mills College and walked into her sociology of women class on a rainy January afternoon in 1979. I couldn't have imagined then, when I circled her course in the class schedule, that she would profoundly transform my understanding of the world and of myself. I know I speak for so many Mills women who shared this experience. And if you're out there today, I send an embrace to all of you. The rigor of Diana's analysis as we parse such works as The Second Sex and Shulamith Firestone's The Dialectic of Sex came to exemplify brilliance for me, but even brilliance seems too generic a word to describe the unique power of her intellect as it was inflected by the stamina of her activism. And just as she epitomized intellectual precision and erudition for her students, she also brought warmth, generosity, and a great deal of patience to her teaching. I recall many moments in class when Diana attempted valiantly and tactfully to accommodate the gap between the limitations of our experience as 19 and 20-year-old women and the nuances of the sexual politics that were under discussion. Only years later did Diana reveal to me the insecurity she felt as a teacher, which I found absolutely impossible to believe until I found myself standing in front of my own Stanford class a decade or so later. She seemed fearless to me, but one of the gifts among many of our long friendship is that I came to understand it was courage and not fearlessness that she modeled for me. I also realized that she wasn't just ambivalent about teaching, she was also impatient with its many demands because it detracted from the important feminist scholarship and social activism that was her life's blood. I now marvel at how much she accomplished during her tenure at Mills. I only wish she could have truly recognized the many contributions she made through the women she inspired to question, to resist, and to act. Diana was certainly of her time, but she was also ahead of it. She asked us to be outraged by systemic racism, sexism, and homophobia, placing these issues at the center of her curriculum in the 70s. And she involved us in her political work by inviting us, for instance, to help to organize the International Tribunal on Crimes Against Women. I don't believe she ever wrote about her teaching, but it was a radical pedagogy, even by today's standards. And if she had chosen to theorize her teaching philosophy, her writing would surely have shared a place next to bell Hook's Teaching to Transgress and Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Diana energized the Mills campus culture and led us out of the ivory tower that might have come to define our education there, impressing upon us our agency and our responsibility to be the change we wanted to see, to borrow Gandhi's phrase. I fiercely admired Diana. I'm sure I idealized her, as you can tell, but I also deeply loved her. And like all of you, it is difficult for me to imagine this world without our long conversations, without her magnificent force for social justice, and without her irrepressible spirit of sisterhood. Thank you.
I first met Diana at the UN International Women's Year Conference in Mexico City in 1975. I was traveling in America, researching how to set up rape crisis organization in South Africa. So I crossed over into Mexico to attend the conference. The UN conference was overwhelming. I knew Diana, a fellow South African, was at the conference, and I identified her at a plenary session and nervously introduced myself and handed her a small gift her mother Molly had given me in Cape Town. This goddess-like woman towered over me. She smiled down at me benignly and spoke kindly to me for a while. She gave me her address and phone number and offered me to stay with her for a few days at her home in Berkeley when I came to San Francisco. When I arrived at her house, I gathered that among her other projects, she was planning the International Tribunal on Crimes Against Women that was to take place in Brussels the next year. She suggested that I attend and asked if I could bring a Black South African woman with me. At the beginning of 1976, responding to Diana's request, I asked Cindy Maguna if she would accompany me to the International Tribunal and give testimony about her life under apartheid. She courageously agreed, and the funds were gathered. Cindy West's testimony received a standing ovation. She was the only Black woman from Africa at the conference. The tribunal was more of a life-changing experience than the one at the UN conference, because it drew together grassroots women and activists who were working to stop violence against women from all over Europe, the UK, and the US. These women were not government representatives spouting propaganda, which was what was happening at the UN conference. But these were genuine grassroots activists. This tribunal set up important feminist networks all over the Western world. From the time we first met, Diana supported and encouraged me in my mission to set up Rape Crisis in Cape Town. The analysis of the problem of rape and the methods we used to set up the anti-rape movement all came from the information I had gathered in America. Diana's book, The Politics of Rape, A Victim's Perspective, gave me unique inside knowledge of the impact of this crime. Diana and other American women that we were in contact with were endlessly generous in their support over those difficult years. Diana was always there for us, and for me, when things were really tough, encouraging, supporting, and believing in our ability to keep going. Her books have educated us and given us the analysis we needed to campaign and take a stand against various forms of male violence. The findings of her research have influenced government policies and changed legislation in many countries and at United Nations level. We in Cape Town used her book on pornography at a parliamentary meeting with the ANC Women's Caucus in an attempt to get them to see the violence and racism in the different genres of pornography and to take a stand against it. We weren't successful in convincing them. Her book, Lives of Courage, documented the valuable and essential work done by South African women in the anti-apartheid struggle, work that would have been unrecorded but for her. A book, Behind Closed Doors in White South Africa, is a chilling and valuable record of sexual abuse within families, and she links this type of male violence to the apartheid system. Diana's research ethics was so good. Respondents found the experience life-changing because it led them to insights, emotional validation, and support they had not experienced before. Many said she saved their lives and gave them hope to carry on. For 45 years, Diana and I shared our political and personal struggles through tape letters, phone calls, and emails. She was unswervingly supportive and inspiring. Leah, my partner, and I had her to stay with us in London and in Cape Town. Her visits always had an impact. It was like, hold everything, Diana's arriving. We found her capacity to achieve her goals inspiring. Leah always begged her to have some fun. Leah always spelled out the word fun, F-U-N, because Diana did not appear to understand the word, though she did have a self-deprecating sense of humor and an impish delight in successful, outrageous activism. I agonized over her declining health in her last years. She would email me a list of her ailments, which really depressed me. I was so relieved to hear from her sister Jill that she died peacefully. I miss her. In fact, I feel quite lost without her.
When I first met Diana more than 30 years ago, what began as a 2-hour interview turned into a lifelong friendship. I had never encountered anyone like Diana before. Fierce and forthright, she was the first woman I had met who listened to survivors, really listened. In her listening, she helped me uncover the truth, not only about my own individual story, but the bigger story of a system that persecuted women. Through conversations with her, I became clear that the personal was political, and she inspired me to rage and resist. Diana taught me that words mattered, the words you said, the words you read, but above all the words that you wrote. That the written word could be used to dismantle the system that continues to hurt and kill girls and women. Time after time, her words gave me strength. More than once, they saved my life. She was an avid correspondent, and her letters were always sources of encouragement. Often filled with photographs, receiving them was an absolute joy and delight. Diana had an energy that was unwavering. Talking into the wee hours of the morning didn't seem to disrupt her source of energy one iota. In fact, the more she worked, the more energized she became. She was also creative and innovative. When founding Guerrilla Women Against Patriarchy, we sat in the dark corner of a mediocre restaurant in Rondebosch in Cape Town, drinking mediocre red wine, while she constructed the logo from small fluffy gorilla stickers that she had acquired at a stationery store. From these foundations, she started a one-woman campaign which called out misogynists for their behavior. She was delighted by the media's response to this organization, which was mostly just Diana on her own. Her work with Guerrilla Women Against Patriarchy inspired me even further and showed me that you didn't require a huge organization or vast amounts of funds to make a difference, to stand up against violence against women. What was required was to stand in your truth. Diana taught me that solitary acts of defiance and rebellion were what were required. It is with her in my mind and on my heart that I will continue to rage and resist. Diana may no longer be with us in person, but I am forever indebted to her for the tools that she has left behind for us to continue to fight the battle. Diana, I miss you. Thank you.
Well, I will not list the important books and conferences and academic role that Diana played, because that has already been done very, very well. So I will speak more to her importance to us on this continent as an activist and as a voice of definition and of the future. She was a prophet. She understood by such means as simply going to the phone book and identifying random families in her city, how prevalent child sexual abuse was, even before we could prove it in other ways. She was a presence in both her books and conferences that explained femicide, that women were being murdered simply because we were female. No one else was saying that in the same way, and no one else was explaining the intertwining of racism and sexism in the same way. Clearly, in order to perpetuate racism, one has to control women as the means of reproduction. And so those two things, as she understood, are intertwined and can only be uprooted together. I hope that she didn't pay the price of exile in some ways from her country. I remember times of her worry and difficulty about returning. But she was a gift to this continent, certainly in her prophet, her role as a prophet. It's hard to think of anyone else who so changed fundamentally our understanding of the price of patriarchy and the price of racism. And it's hard to think of anyone else who was so clear, devoted, and supportive and life-enhancing in her friendship. There was no time in my life, and I know the times of the lives of the people who are listening, when we were not always clear that if we called her, we would find support, love, a sense of humor, and some new understanding that we had never had before. I especially feel, as someone who is older than she, that it's not fair that she is not with us still. It is not fair. And I can't escape the feeling of anger about that. But she has left us with such a rich legacy of compassion, of understanding, of new words, of global analysis, of a political view that starts with the family. She understood so well that violence in the family is the source of violence in the street and in the world, that only when we have truly democratic families and peaceful families and non-patriarchal families will we be able to extend true democracy and safety for women into the world. So I devoutly feel that she should be with us now. It's not fair, but I know that with everyone else here, I am pledging myself to keeping her words alive, her spirit alive, her humor alive, her fearlessness alive in this time when we need it so, so much. Perhaps this time of COVID is teaching us that this, whatever it is, this COVID event does not recognize gender and race and class and what continent we are on. In an odd way, it is uniting us. And I hope and believe that we can take this and combine it with Diana's spirit and move forward in a way that would make her proud. She has changed my life. She has changed so many lives. And as long as we remember her, as long as we act with her spirit inside us, she will be alive still. I thank everyone who has given us this gift of being able to talk about our love for Diana.
Hello, everyone. I'm a friend of Diana's, and I'm honored to be here. Diana and I first connected when I reached out to her for help with a project that addressed the sexual exploitation of women. Diana was very responsive, kind, helpful, and welcoming. She embodied the concept of true sisterhood, and I was extremely grateful. It meant the world to me. What Diana and I shared most in common was the experience of being a woman, an adult, human, female. Diana and I both experienced abuse by males throughout our lives, and it was our mutual understanding of this sexist harm and oppression shared by so many females globally that bonded us. What Diana and I recently discussed the most was the topic that so many women have recently been forced to deal with, gender ideology. Diana felt very strongly about this issue and was aware that if it was not properly addressed, that her entire lifetime of work would be put at risk, as well as the well-being, rights, and opportunities of all women and girls globally. Diana knew that the oppression of females was not based on some mysterious gender identity, but on the undeniable reality of biological sex. Diana also knew that one's sex is inescapable and can't be identified out of. A girl can't opt out of female genital mutilation because she, quote, feels like a boy, unquote, and a young woman can't stop herself from being trafficked as a sex slave because she's decided that she's, quote, non-binary, unquote. Abusive men know what a female is, and they don't ask what someone's pronouns are or how they identify before they decide to abuse, rape, or sexually exploit them. Diana was outraged that some men would try to claim the identity of woman. She was even more appalled at the invasion of women's private spaces by such men, most of whom still have male genitalia. Women's restrooms, locker rooms, showers, dormitories, rape crisis centers, and domestic violence shelters are all being invaded by men, violating women's important rights to privacy and safety. Diana was shocked that some of these men were now also being placed in women's prisons, and that some of these offenders have subsequently raped and assaulted some women inmates. She was also shocked that many crimes by men are now often counted as crimes committed by women, thus making it impossible to have accurate statistics of male violence, particularly male violence against women. Further, men are now invading women's sports and are unfairly winning awards and sometimes physically harming women. Recently, 300 female athletes, including Martina Navratilova, signed a letter objecting to this outrageous abuse of their sex-based rights. Particularly upsetting to Diana was the exponential increase of young women who are being put on puberty blockers and male hormones and who are getting their healthy breasts removed. In many cases, these young women are identifying as males simply because they don't fit the harmful sexist stereotype of women presented as ideal by pornified pop culture. The most personal for Diana was how this is happening to so many young lesbians. They are being erased as lesbians and are being physically and mentally harmed by the unethical practices of the gender ideology medical industrial complex. Thankfully, many young women have now realized they were being harmfully indoctrinated and are detransitioning. They are speaking out and forming groups such as the Peak Resilience Project and are educating others so they won't end up like they did, often with irreversible damage. Many other women are speaking out, such as Diana's friend, Julie Bindel, who wrote a powerful obituary of Diana, which was published today in The Guardian. Julie has been deplatformed repeatedly for defending women's rights, and she is with us here today. Another example is J.K. Rowling, who is being attacked for stating the reality of biological sex and for standing up for women's sex-based rights. There's also Megan Murphy of Feminist Current, who got banned from Twitter for saying that men aren't women. Additionally, many parents are organizing, such as those at Fourth Wave Now. Diana understood that denying the biological reality of what a woman truly is an extreme form of misogyny, homophobia, sexism, and gaslighting. If she'd had more time, she would have been proud to join with other gender-critical feminists in this critically important battle for women's rights and survival. Being a close friend of Diana's could be challenging, but it was also worthwhile and enriching. Diana was caring, thoughtful, and compassionate, as well as being very generous and supportive. I will be eternally grateful for Diana's amazing and priceless lifetime of work, and I'm very thankful for our special friendship. I will always love you, Diana, and you will never be forgotten. I hope that if there is an afterlife, which I know you didn't believe in, that you have been joyfully reunited with your beloved Flicka and Lovies, and that you are happy and at peace. You certainly have earned that.
Hello, everyone. Diana and I were very close, very dear, special friends during the last 10 plus years of her life. We met in 2009 when she was 70. I was a little younger. I remember very clearly at the beginning of our relationship when we first went out to dinner, and that's mostly what we did. We had dinner every few weeks and talked for 4 to 5 hours at a time. I remember clearly her telling me how much she wanted emotional intimacy in her relationships, that they be a place of trust where she could bring her problems, be candid about what she was going through, and show vulnerability. We were both unpartnered, no children, very little family, lesbian or queer, aging. I welcomed the close connection. During this time, Diana was struggling mightily under a mountain of problems, responsibilities, endeavors. Her conditions were overwhelming, never simple, seldom stable. Whether it was her finances, countless practical matters, the care of her home, her ever-changing housemates/tenants, her changing personal assistants, her failing health, both mind and body, end-of-life considerations such as the disposition of her papers, the massive files of research for her books. Each and every day was a struggle to cope, and above all, to keep on working. When she was most fulfilled, most calm and at ease and open was when she was writing. It was almost as if she became a different person. And a fine writer she was, clear, readable, compelling. She was writing her multi-volume memoirs, a volume on her childhood, child sexual abuse, a volume on her marriage, how awful it was, a volume on her academic life. And then she took a detour to write about her family background when she read about Violet Gibson in a 2010 book called The Woman Who Shot Mussolini. Driven by anti-fascism and her love of Italy, Violet Gibson brandished a gun and attempted to assassinate Benito Mussolini, grazing his nose. This was in Rome in 1926. She was apprehended and lived out decades of her life in a mental institution. To Diana, Violet Gibson was Aunt Violet, her great aunt on her mother's side, the aristocratic side of her family. And Diana was utterly fascinated that they were of the same family. Then Diana took up her final volume of her memoirs, a book on her activism. She shared chapters with me. A chapter on revolution in the home, about in the 1960s, the decisive role she and her twin brother Dave played in getting their father to resign as MP in the South African Parliament. A chapter about her dangerous path into the South African anti-apartheid underground. A chapter on what it took to conduct the interviews in state of emergency South Africa in the 80s for the sterling book, Lives of Courage, Women for a New South Africa. She was working on this activism book almost up to the end of her life, and I think it's near completion, and it would be a great tribute to her if it found a publisher. Diana's trailblazing work on violence against women and the prevalent studies of which she was most proud was her greatest contribution. I'd like to draw attention to her internationalism. She designed a flag that's pictured on her website that says, "Sisterhood is powerful. Global sisterhood is more powerful." Diana's 30-plus year campaign to popularize the concept of femicide culminated in her last public appearance in 2012 when she presented at the first United Nations seminar on femicide in Vienna. She described this as one of the most thrilling days of her life. Diana was a great human being, kind, loving, determined. I cared for her and I loved her and will miss her for the rest of my life. Rest in power, Diana.
Hello, this is Esther Rothblum again. Thank you everyone who participated in this memorial. And I want to end this with Diana's own words. In a 1995 article, she stated, quote, "My research and activism exemplify how personal trauma can inform and inspire creative work. Looking back on the work I have done, I have made many contributions of which I feel proud. Despite these accomplishments, the price I have paid for my radical feminism has been high. Despite the many penalties I have undergone for failing to serve the patriarchy, I don't regret my choices most of the time, particularly when I remember that my work has been helpful to many women." So thank you, Diana, for your friendship and your vital scholarship. And now we will close the memorial. Please do email your tributes to me for Diana's website. And thank you for coming.
N'Kosi Sikelel Afrika, Malupa Kamisu Pangolwayo.